Okay, so we're back again. Continuing our discussion of the Constitution. Now we've hit the preamble. Got Article 1, legislative branch. Article 2, the executive branch, presidency. Article 3, the judiciary. And got the three main branches of government covered. Like I said, the legislative branch would have a lot to do, so they have a lot of temptations, a lot of power, so they put a lot of very specific detail in that. What it's supposed to do, how they're elected, how they're organized, what they can do, what they can't do. Article 2, the executive branch, the presidency. Who's the president? What's he do? Who does he think he is? The judiciary, federal judges, make it the Supreme Court. Left kind of loose because Congress, remember, they're deciding who the judiciary is going to be, what the qualifications are, how many people be on the Supreme Court, and so forth. Then you get to Article 4. And some of these articles have kind of a few things thrown in together, but referred to as the full faith and credit clause, and also has to do with the states. Now, Section 1 of Article 4. Full faith and credit to be given to each state in the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. And the Congress may by general laws prescribe the manner in which such acts, records, and proceedings shall be proved and the effect thereof. So basically, it says the states shall cooperate with each other. They shall recognize certain things in each other's states. For example, if you're married in one state, you're married in all the states. You're divorced in one state, you're divorced in all the states. You own a car here in Arkansas, you're considered the legal owner of that car everywhere. Things like that. Now, that leads into Section 2. The citizens of each state shall be entitled to all the privileges and immunities of citizens of the several states. Person charged in any state with treason, felony, or other crime who shall flee from justice and be found in another state shall demand that the executive authority of the state which he fled be delivered to be removed from the state having jurisdiction of the crime. That is, you steal a car, you rob a bank here, and you flee all the way up to Idaho, just for sake of supposing. They catch you there, what are they going to do? They have to have an extradition hearing. Because you've been arrested, you're under arrest, say, state of Idaho, you're subject to that point to the jurisdiction of the state of Idaho. So the state of Arkansas then would have to prove this is who you are, this is what you're tried, prove that, yeah, this is what we're looking for, this is what he's tried with, and we have reasonable evidence of the laws of our state that he has committed these crimes. So they hold an extradition hearing. Sometimes they're waived. Sometimes, yeah, we know it's him, no point going through this. But sometimes they go through this long hearing. I had to pull them back. Especially if it's cases involving a death penalty. Those tend to be a little bit more involved. This other part here in Section 2, that's been taken out because of the 13th Amendment. It has to do with slavery. Basically saying that slaves escaping in other states can be returned back to the states in which they were enslaved. Like I say, Congress passed a couple of laws for the Civil War called the Fugitive Slave Acts, basically empowering the government at different levels to be able to find slaves who escaped to bring them back. As you get closer to the Civil War, those are more and more controversial. And it caused a real problem with the Constitution because, What if you live in a state, basically live your whole life in a state where there is no slavery? Are you still a slave? What point do you stop being a slave? Is your freedom only conditional? That was what the whole Dred Scott case was about, because the 1850s, that was a very racist time period. I mean, and it's so racist, even the Ku Klux Klan say they're racist. But whole case of a man who basically was lived his whole most of his life in free territory, places where slavery had never existed, where he had all the rights and privileges of any other citizen, including the right to vote in these states. But because he's born a slave in Virginia, and his owner never fully emancipated him, there's this whole weird legal limbo. Now, there are a lot of people arguing the 1850s that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights literally was for whites only, even though it doesn't say anything like that. They wanted to twist it in a way that say that all the rights and privileges are only for whites, but that's what this case came down to. The question is, once you're a free man, you're always a free man, or once you're a slave, are you always a slave? You never have any rights. The Supreme Court, what came essentially was the worst decision in history, agreed to by all scholars across the political spectrum, that the Dred Scott decision in 1857 said, once a slave, always a slave. African Americans can never have rights. And so that was a big deal, and they came up with the 14th Amendment, saying that if you're born in the United States, you are a citizen, you go through the naturalization process, you are a citizen, and you have the full rights and privileges of any other citizen, equal to everyone. Making sure that was explicitly clear from that point forward. So this part here is no longer valid. Erased by the 13th Amendment ending slavery and the 14th Amendment guaranteeing equality of citizenship. Section 3, new states. How do we get new states? We started with 13, now we got 50. How do we get there? Well, new states may be admitted by the Congress into this union. But that's a delicate, painstaking process. And essentially, to become a state, Congress votes to make you a state. Now, there's several different ways this has gone through this, several different standards, but they started with the Northwest Ordinance 1787. It goes from the old Articles of Federation government. And through most of American history, most states went through this same process, including Arkansas, that Congress would form a territory. This Congress, since those are federal lands, subject to the authority of the federal government, Congress has the right to organize and divide those territories as they see fit. So they form a territory. In this case, the Arkansas Territory, or the Kansas Territory, Colorado Territory, Montana Territory, Michigan Territory, things like that. Pretty much all the states west of the Appalachians went through the same thing. Territory. And then you go through the territory process. Territory to statehood process. Now, there are going to be a few exceptions here. One, territorial government is established. And initially, that is a governor, territorial secretary, and 3 judges. These judges act as land commissioners and also as magistrates. Territorial secretary would be combination treasurer, record keeper, and so forth. And the territorial governor kind of manages the whole thing. Now, all of these would be appointed by the president. Again, just like with ambassadors or judges or anything, these would be appointed by the president with the approval of the Senate. Second part. The territory has a population of 5,000 adult males. They can establish an elected legislature. And when Arkansas established its territory in 1819, there were already a fair number of people living here. So they quickly went through the process of setting up the territorial legislature. How do we had 5,000 adult men? We just get that set up. We moved the capital from Arkansas Post on the Mississippi River all out to Little Rock. At which point, this new elected legislature, the governor would have a veto over any legislation coming out of that territorial legislature. But Congress also had a veto over it. Whereas each territory had subject to the Constitution, and therefore the Bill of Rights does apply here. People do have a certain rights that are guaranteed. And then, population reaches an established threshold. It can be 50,000 to 100,000, depending. Territory can convene a constitutional convention and apply for statehood. They have their own little meeting, decide what their state constitution is going to look like. And Congress can veto this new constitution. And that was especially delicate during the slavery period, because you would have some states wanting to enshrine slavery in the Constitution, others trying to get rid of it, others kind of halfway state. So it's a very delicate situation. So then it goes down to this part. Congress. They receive the petition and the proposed state constitution. Congress votes on approval for statehood. If they say yes, then we get to add a new star on the flag. If not, they stay a territory. It's not in the Constitution, but it's part of the U.S. flag code. And really, for on up through the late 1800s, there was no uniform design for the stars on the flag. So you see a lot of these old stars, all these kind of weird kind of star designs and so forth. Weird bystander. But then you have the uniform flag code. That law came into effect saying there's a specific design for those stars, and it's redesigned every time a new state was added. So, get a new state. Now, a couple caveats here. No new state shall be formed or erected within the jurisdiction of any other state. That is, the state as it is, that's the way it's going to be. Unless their legislature says, okay, we can change the boundaries. That's happened a couple of times. But one part of one state can't decide, you know what, I don't like the rest of the state, so I'm breaking away and forming my own. Little Rock can't get mad at the state legislature and say, you know what, we're making our own state. The state of Little Rock. Everyone else can go away. Could they do that? Only if the state legislature said, okay, you form your own state. See you later. That could happen. But but they're probably not going to. Next, a new state can't be formed by combining two states, again, not without the consent of the legislature. So, got North and South Dakota. We have too many Dakotas? Some people say yes. But you can't make them back into one giant Dakota unless their legislators say, okay, we're forming a new Dakota. We're making a new Dakota. Now, the big part here, Section 3, Congress again shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States. And nothing in this Constitution will be construed as to prejudice any claims of the United States or any particular state. Basically, the territories are managed by Congress. Their rule. So let's go ahead and take a look here. Alrighty. Alright. Giant map of the United States. This all came down. This is how the United States ended up adding territory to it. Now, a lot of territory we added cut by purchasing it, the Louisiana Purchase, annexation, but usually treaties with other nations, which involved 2/3 majority vote by Congress. Louisiana Purchase, really popular. Almost no opposition to that. Texas, a lot of debate over that because it's 1845, debate over slavery is in full swing. Texas is going to be the last slave state admitted, as it turns out. But Mexico also claimed Texas, so there's some dispute about it. So they couldn't get the two. So while the Republic of Texas made a treaty with the United States to be annexed to the United States, the U.S. Senate wouldn't ratify it, wouldn't get the 2/3 majority vote. So how did they get around that? They went back to the old statehood process. Congress simply made a law saying Texas is a state. Congratulations. That's how Texas came to the 28th state in the USA. Now, Thomas Jefferson, going back to Louisiana Purchase, he's president when the U.S. is negotiating the Louisiana Purchase. Now, Francis comes out of the blue and says, "Here, we'll offer you the whole thing, $3 million bucks." We're kind of surprised we were basically handed this much territory, but Jefferson was kind of concerned because he thought, well, does the United States government have the authority to purchase territory? As you read this Constitution here, it's not explicit. Doesn't it say, yes, America can buy territory whenever it wants? But justification, his aides argued, was what they called an implied power. So the implied power. That is, it doesn't specifically say the United States can do it. It doesn't say specifically we can't do it. So the ability to buy the Louisiana Purchase, to go through the Louisiana Purchase, lay in the treaty-making provisions of the United States Constitution. It is a simple 2/3 majority vote. This America originally existed in 1783. And here on the East Coast, you see the states as they ratified the Constitution. But these states back west, they go through the process of territories and then state. Ohio 1803, Illinois 1818, Missouri 1821. They were all territories at one point. A lot of territories, such as the northern boundary of Canada, that was by treaty. This area here, between Webster Ashburn, gives us a firm, secure, definite border for Maine. Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So the Oregon country. So Alaska here, purchased from Russia, approved by treaty in 1867. They're still mad at us. We got a bunch of oil there. Access on so forth Hawaii in 1898. So this is how we get our territory here. But there are certain territories that are not states yet. Like say after 1912, you have the lower 48 states, but you still have Alaska and Hawaii weren't states yet. Say Alaska and Hawaii don't become states till 1959. There's other territories too. What about them? Yeah. Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, and so forth. And also District of Columbia. Washington, D.C., that is a federal territory, but it's basically just a city. Fairly large city, about 700,000 people, more people in Washington, D.C. than in the state of Vermont or the state of Wyoming. It depends on how you range people. Yeah, it's a crowded little city. But they don't have any congressional representation. They are technically a territory. This is a huge thing for Washington, D.C. for a long time, was they're a city, but Congress is basically running it. And Congress wasn't listening to what the people of Washington, D.C. wanted. They're basically doing whatever they wanted, whatever kind of pet project they wanted. And it wasn't until the 1970s they get to what they called having getting what they called home rule, where they could elect their own city government. They could have their own license plates. They have their own mayor, city council, and pretty much do what they want. Congress still can veto legislation out of Washington, D.C., but they decide not to. Basically, just kind of let it run itself.
Basically, why D.C. in prison?
Yeah.
They were doing what they wanted to do.
Exactly. Yeah. But Washington, D.C., the people there, they want statehood. Because while they have a non-voting delegate, they have no say in the government. There's a motto in the District of Columbia license plate, taxation without representation. They have to pay federal taxes, but they have no votes in Congress. They want those two senators that one vote in Congress. They want that. Because they want their say in the government. And the other territories too. Let's go to Guam for a minute. This is the official web page of the territory of Guam, guam.gov. It's where America's Day begins. It is in the Western Pacific. It's on the other side of the date line, so yes, they say technically it is where America's Day begins. Native population, the Chamorros, they have their phrase of the month. Hafa Adai, which means hello. Veterans information, history and culture, relocated Guam, military Guam. Big military bases on Guam. It's very important in World War II. Big business on Guam. Such as government news. Visited by federal officials, school issues, Lieutenant Governor, his efforts to return latte stones to Guam, basically a issue among the native population, so forth. Rectory. Get back to it.
governor and office of governor and lieutenant governor. All about what they do here, boards and commissions. Basically, pretty much runs like a regular state, but it's not a big island. Maybe 100,000 people. The but they have no representation in Washington, D.C. But District of Columbia, like Guam, like Puerto Rico, like the Virgin Islands, they all have their own, they have a non-voting delegate. They have somebody they elect who goes to Congress and speaks on their behalf. Sometimes they have voting privileges in the in committees and such, but they have no vote of legislation because they're not a state yet. And Guam would like to change that.
They want to be a state.
They do.
They want to be more of a state or more free, like not.
Yeah, some of these do. Like Puerto Rico. But Puerto Rico, yeah, there is an independence movement there. It's not big, but it was bigger in the past, but not very much anymore. But there's some people want to make Puerto Rico independent. There's a big movement there for statehood. And some people want to kind of keep it the way it is. Not too close to the United States, kind of on its own, but it has its protection. In 1952, Puerto Rico is given full self-government. Basically, it can kind of run its own affairs, but still subject to the federal laws of the United States. Still has non-voting delegate to Congress and so forth. But it's kind of in a legal limbo. So while Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia have voted for statehood, Congress won't bring it up for a vote. Last session of Congress, the House did bring up the District of Columbia up for statehood, and it passed the House of Representatives, but the Senate refused to take it up. They didn't want District of Columbia being a state.
Is it because because they have the size?
Yeah, that's one. There's a couple of arguments about it. The size is one of them because it's so small. It would be smaller than Rhode Island. Some of it is because and some of it because yes, the District of Columbia, they voted 95% for Joe Biden in the last election. So it's pretty clear which party they're going to be voting for if they became a state. Similarly with Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico would likely be a Democratic state, as have been these others here. Guam is maybe the one exception here. Not exactly sure they may go either way. But that's one reason why Hawaii and Alaska were allowed in at the same time, because they thought, okay, Hawaii's going to be the Republican state, Alaska's going to be the Democratic state. It balance out. Turns out it's just the opposite. But yes, there are five territories out there. Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, American Samoa, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, plus the District of Columbia. So these islands, they're kind of small in population. The Virgin Islands, Marianas, Samoa, Guam. And you've got these out here, these kind of in the middle of the Pacific. They're unpopulated. They're very tiny little, basically big rocks sticking up out of the ocean. No one lives there. Not a lot you can do with them. There's fuel resource here and there, but that's it. But basically what we have is bragging rights. And we basically got these in the 1850s. There's talk maybe adding this to Hawaii, giving them the responsibility over it, but Hawaii said, nah, they don't want to deal with the expense. That same thing, some of these little islands here, basically giant rocks out of the water, sticking out of the water, no one really lives there. It's kind of legal limbo. But could they become states? Oh, yes, they can. Yes, they can very much. If Congress, the House and the Senate, vote to make them so. Now, there are some states that say that some people wanted to separate from a state. Northern California, for years, talked about breaking away from the rest of the state. That is as late as the 1940s, but the state legislature never went with it. Last time they were pushing was right before World War II, when Pearl Harbor hit. Decided just no, this is a time for unity. We're not going to keep pushing for that. Some states in eastern Oregon and eastern Washington are talking about wanting to join Idaho because the politics of those counties east of the Rockies is a lot different from those on the coast. Cities like Seattle, Portland. But to do that, legislature of Oregon and the legislature of Idaho would have to agree. And Oregon's not letting these eastern counties go. Washington isn't letting these eastern counties go. Idaho isn't sure what to do. They're just glad to finally be included in the conversation, basically. Now, initially, you had the Dakota Territory. It was one big Dakota, but Congress, when it created these states, divided the Dakota Territory into two at the last minute to create two Dakotas, North and South Dakota. West Virginia, that comes from the Civil War. When Virginia seceded, these western counties, these mountain counties in western Virginia and was now West Virginia, they didn't want to secede because there was no slavery in these counties, hardly. Because, well, you can't grow rice or tobacco in the mountains. So, no slavery. They didn't feel like any need to break away from the Union. And plus, Western Virginia was always tired of being dragged along with whatever the title and planters of the East wanted. So there's always that kind of tension there between Eastern and Western Virginia. When the Civil War hit, Western Virginia, the western county said, no, we're staying with the Union. And so that went through a wild phase back and forth. And finally, in 1863, Congress recognized the legislature of West Virginia as the legitimate legislature and voted to make West Virginia its own state. That's how you get West Virginia. So, that's Article 4, Section 3, Statehood. There's a special provision in here, Section 4 of Article 4. The United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a republican form of government, and shall protect each of them against invasion, and on application of the legislature or the executive, the legislature cannot be convened, against domestic violence. That is, there's a series of riots, the governor can't ask for the president to send in the army or the National Guard. That has happened before.
but guaranteeing each a Republican form of government. That is, one man can't set himself up as a dictator or the king of Nebraska. Can't do that. It has to be a republic. Even if the people vote for it, it still has to be a republic. Can't use democratic means for undemocratic ends. They can't make themselves into a communist dictatorship. It is a elected republic. And if a state is attacked, that is an attack on all the states, and the United States government is duty bound to protect these states from invasion. Yep. That's section 4. Now, get to the next thing, Article 5. That is amendments. Suppose you want to change this thing. Not a problem. We have an amendment process. Now, under the Articles of Confederation, it took the approval of all 13 states to approve an amendment. Basically impossible, because you can't get all the states to agree on anything. It's a little less onerous, but it is still process in place. The Constitution has been amended 27 times. 10 of those with the Bill of Rights of 1791. They were ratified in 1791. Since then, only 17 ratified since 1791. That's a process that takes a very long time. It takes a lot of agreement, so it's very hard to get through. And this is what it is according to the Constitution. That 2/3 of both houses have to approve an amendment, both houses of Congress. And then 3/4 of the states have to ratify it. Now, if the ratification law of the states, it's either the state legislature or the states can have a special convention of delegates voted on by the people, or they go in and that convention approves it. That's almost never done. So, with this, Article 5, it's a 3-step process. The House of Representatives, 2/3 majority vote. The Senate, 2/3 majority vote. That can go in either order, Senate or House first. But then goes to the states, 3/4 have to ratify. Now that we've got 50 states, that means 38 states have to ratify it to become an amendment. So, that's how you make an amendment. It's a very long, painstaking process. A long, long time. Now, there's no length it has to take to prove an amendment. It can be proved in a matter of months. Sometimes takes years or even decades to do that. The Bill of Rights, they are ratified within a year and a half. So they're very popular amendments. Interestingly enough, the Bill of Rights, there were originally 12 amendments proposed. 10 of them were ratified. The 2 that were not approved were 1, an amendment adjusting the apportionment of seats in Congress for the first Congress. And the second one was regarding congressional pay raises, saying that Congress couldn't adjust its pay until an election takes place first. That fell just a couple states short of that 3/4 ratification. But here's the thing, there's no deadline on this, unless you specifically put a deadline into the amendment. A lot of them say 7 years. 7 years to approve this, but you don't have to do that. Well, this one didn't have that. This congressional pay raise amendment didn't have that in there. So, it'd get brought up every so often, fall a couple states short. A couple more would fall a couple of states short. And then by the 1990s, everyone's mad at Congress, and they realized, hey, this amendment's still out there. So I had a couple more states to agree, and Michigan was the 38th state to ratify it, and so the 27th Amendment was ratified in 1992, 203 years after it was first proposed. Yes, it could take 200 years to ratify it. Now, some people suggested, could Congress challenge whether that was a lawful ratification after 203 years? Yes, but is any congressman going to challenge an amendment saying you have to go to the voters before you get a pay raise? They're not going to do that. Let's take a look at some of these amendments here. Like I say, a lot of them are proposed in each congressional session. All sorts of bizarre little things. Some are make it floor of Congress, most don't. This is the Constitution, United States, the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. It has a lot of interesting information on the Constitution. This has an interesting article here on items deleted from Madison's original Bill of Rights, because it was James Madison who, as a member of Congress, proposed the Bill of Rights in the first session of Congress. And constitutioncenter.org here has this pretty little neat little thing here. Things that were not included in the Bill of Rights. It's a neat little article here, but you have several being proposed in Congress right now. One, H.J.R. 58, proposing amendment to the Constitution to repeal the 16th Article of the Amendment. And what is that? Mary Moore of Alabama wants a constitutional amendment to repeal the constitutional amendment that gave Congress the power to impose income taxes. To repeal the income tax amendment, which was ratified in 1913. Now, just take a simple majority vote to repeal the federal income taxes, but Mary Moore here wants the entire 16th Amendment repealed. So he introduced it, he filed it, and in this case, goes to the House Committee on the Judiciary, which is the committee which talks about constitutional amendments and the federal structure of the federal judiciary. And basically, it's been there since April of 2023. You have things like this proposed every so often. Like say in the 1890s, there was a Utah congressman who proposed an amendment wanting to change the name of the United States to the United States of the world. That one day we're going to take over everything. Yeah, that one didn't get through, and I don't think he won re-election. But the amendment process, it can be, remember, once an amendment is ratified, the only thing that can undo an amendment is another amendment. The Supreme Court can undo it, Congress can undo it, the President can undo it, only an amendment. The 18th Amendment, ratified in 1919, which imposed prohibition, proved to be unpopular, and was repealed in 1933, the 21st Amendment, repealing prohibition. It's the only time this happened in American history. Could it happen again? Yeah, but Barry Moore had his way, but it's technically possible, but it's very difficult to do. There's still people talking about amendments to
repeal, to bring back prohibition. There are amendments proposed in almost every session of Congress trying to make abortion illegal across the entire country, so forth. Here's one. Andy Biggs of Arizona. This one's been popular. It's come up a lot since the 1990s. HJR 36, introduced March 2023, proposing a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution of the United States, requiring that Congress must always have the budget balanced. That is, as much as it takes in, it can only spend as much as it takes in. Of course, it would be easier, Congress passing a balanced budget. States have this written into their constitutions already. Arkansas is one of them. The argument is, at the time of a national emergency, sometimes Uncle Sam may need to run up the credit card to pay for national defense or something. But this is one of the latest iteration of the balanced budget amendment. And this is the tracker here. It's introduced, passed the House, passed the Senate, the President came along. The President wouldn't be involved with the amendment process. The President's help, President's support of a Constitution can be important, but as part of the amendment process itself, the President is not a part of it. Doesn't have to be. He's just an ordinary citizen in this case, but a very influential citizen. Congress.gov says what happens here. Introduced in the House, refer to the House Committee on Judiciary. It's been there since then. There's another one. HJR 3. An amendment proposing that term limits on members of Congress. There have been various versions of this proposed before. A lot of people talking about it, but it's been brought to the version has been brought to the floor of the House before, but it's never been passed. Just Reporters say that congressmen get entrenched and they lose touch with the people. They get corrupt. Opponents say these guys can show up corrupt. It's not necessarily how long you've been there. Best term, and a lot of opponents say the best term limit is election. It's proposed by Congressman Pat Fallon of Texas, January 2023, referred to the House Committee on the Judiciary. Or it's just been kind of stuck there. Got a lot of these here. And this is Congress.gov. When these amendments are proposed, these congressmen know this isn't going anywhere. So they're doing it basically to grab a few headlines, grab a few donations, get some attention. Performance art, some might say it. Now, might they have a point? I don't know. Supporters say they would have a point. Opponents say they don't. But the gentleman from Texas here knew that this one wasn't going anywhere. Another one here, the Equal Rights Amendment. It's one of those where they try to put a time limit on it. It's passed both houses of Congress, 2/3 majority vote in 1972. Now, the text itself says that there should be no discrimination on the basis of sex in the United States under law. Congress has the power to force this to the appropriate legislation. Basically, men and women are equal entirely under the law. Big triumph of the women's rights movement late in the 60s and 1970s. Well, in the supporting legislation to send this out to the states, Congress attached a little something in the law sending it out to the states saying, you will have 7 years, states will have 7 years to ratify this. Well, by 1979, they came just a couple states short, like 34 states.
And so Congress, they changed that law. Not the proposed amendments that have to go through the whole thing all over again. They changed the law of the supporting legislation, sending out saying, okay, you have 2 more years. Now 1981. Okay, now they're up to 1981 to 35, 3 states short. And it was largely dropped for another 20 years. And a few years ago, a couple other states, three states picked it up and said, okay, we're going to ratify it. Ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. Now it's up to 38 states have ratified it. But that puts it kind of a legal limbo because that supporting legislation saying ratify by 1981 is still in effect. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts says, let's remove that deadline and make it an amendment. She's tried a couple of different things here. Introduced in the House January of 2023. Committee on the Judiciary refused to take it up. So she tried another tactic, a discharge petition. Basically, that's basically get a petition circulated in Congress, try to get a majority of congressmen, 218 people at this point, to say, we're going to vote, we want to vote to approve this. And that means that discharge petition gets the majority, that legislation has to go to the floor of the House for a vote, whether the Speaker of the House wants to vote on it or not. And that's what she tried in July of 23. But it did not get through. So the Equal Rights Amendment is still in legal limbo. HJR 8. From Dusty Johnson of South Dakota, January 9, 2023, proposed a constitutional amendment requiring the United States Supreme Court be composed of 9 Supreme Court justices. That's the number 9. Keep it as it is. Because remember, Article 3 doesn't say how many there has to be. There can be 2, there can be 5, there can be 9, there can be 20, whatever Congress votes on. Dusty Johnson says, let's keep it at 9. Because a lot of people, they're upset at the Supreme Court, some of the rulings they've made. They said, well, let's change the ideological balance of it by expanding the Supreme Court to 11 or 13 members. Congress would have the power to do that under the Constitution. Some people say it's a good idea, some people say it's dumb. Dusty Johnson doesn't think it's a good idea. He's trying to say, let's not politicize it, let's keep it as it is at 9. But again, it's just been stuck here in Congress, in the House Judiciary Committee. This constitutional amendment proposing the United States government have the power to prohibit physical desecration of the flag of the United States. Sometimes in protest, people burn the flag of the United States in protest. It's a despicable act to people who love the country, the flag, and what the flag symbolizes. But the Supreme Court has said in the past, cases dating back to the 1990s, that that's free speech. Well, Steve Womack said, to make an amendment, Congress can prohibit that. So he proposed this legislation. Steve Womack, he's a congressman from Northwest Arkansas. January of 2023, June 2023, where it's basically been House Judiciary Committee since then. But again, a bunch of others here. SJR 45, Gene Jaheen, a senator from New Hampshire, said basically give Congress have the power to regulate campaign contributions. That is, how much money people can spend on campaigns, how much political action committees can contribute to a campaign by a particular member of Congress, how much people can contribute, and how much they can raise and spend. Because there have been a lot of people saying that's legalized bribery, basically. True story. Texas in 1990, the state legislature was voting on a bill regarding um, workers' compensation for workers injured on the job. Basically, legislation to make sure that workers who are hurt, they do receive proper compensation for lost time, injuries, lost wages. Hotly contested in the Texas legislature. And it would affect some industries more than others, particularly the food packing industry. So now you're working very fast. A lot of people get sick there very easily. So dealing with dealing with a lot of different food items, conditions of cleanliness. Also dealing with a lot of cutting instruments. Particularly, I'm thinking of the chicken industry. Well, while the Texas legislature is debating this, on the floor of the Texas House walks Bo Pilgrim, founder and CEO of Pilgrim's Fried Chicken. Man for years famous across East Texas for commercials saying, "I won't sell fat yellow chicken." What does Bo Pilgrim do? Starts doling out $10,000 checks to anyone on the floor of the state legislature he can reach. But the implied understanding that you take this $10,000 check, you're voting against this workers' compensation bill. Bill didn't pass. So the thing about Texas at that time, what Bo Pilgrim did was entirely legal. Yes, anyone could stroll on the floor of the legislature, start writing checks. Or what we like to call campaign contributions. That's what Gene Shaheen's proposing here. That's JR 45. Now, some people say that would be limiting free speech. Some people say it's solving a problem with bribery. After all, can you put a price tag on democracy? Can you put a price tag on an election? That's a serious question to answer. It's had 43 co-sponsors. Introduced in September 2023. Referred to the Committee on the Judiciary. Basically, it's been stuck since then. SJR 21, supporting the Texas Congressman's amendment on the 9-justice size of the Supreme Court. Ted Cruz proposed that, went to the Senate, referred to the Committee on Judiciary, it's been stuck since then. It's a budget amendment, another version I proposed here, 2023, a couple different versions of it. Proposing amendment to the Constitution require individuals to demonstrate cognitive competence as a condition of holding the office of President or Vice President. Is adding, yes, they have to basically take a neurological test to show they're competent. Amendment regarding parental rights. Debbie Lesko of Arizona. Amendment trying to repeal the 17th Amendment, federal budget amendment. Line item veto. That is budget, so they're sent to the president's desk right now. Currently, it's all or nothing. The president either approves it all or disapproves it all. Line item veto is proposed off and on for years. And some governors have this at some states, including Arkansas, that you can basically approve only parts of a budget. Say, just veto certain, only tiny little parts of it and approve the rest. A line item veto. Tom McClintock, California, is proposing this. HJR 10, but again, never got out of committee. And both parties have talked that back and forth a lot. It's more popular among one party when their guy's president than when their other guy's president. The other guy's president. Amendment to the Constitution voting federal, state, and local elections by individuals who are not citizens of the United States. That's HJR 40.
or there are already laws against that. People like to say a lot of things about voter fraud and everything. Of the more than 2 billion votes that have been cast in elections in the last 20 years, there only have been about less than 200 votes that were fraudulently cast. Those are caught very, very quickly. One case a few years ago was a guy who his mother died, but the state had sent her an absentee ballot, mail-in ballot. He filled it out for her after she died and sent it in. They caught him fast on that. Sometimes, yes, you do have people trying to impersonate voters. Very rarely, they are caught quickly. They say non-citizens can't vote. There's already laws in case to do that. An amendment to Congress requiring a 3/5 majority votes for bills increasing taxes, H.R. 56. Sometimes the government can. Congress has that. They House and Senate make up their own rules, but not often. Budget amendment. Amendment. Rights amendment. Things here and there. Term limits amendment. Now this one here, HJR 23, is kind of interesting. It wants to modify the Electoral College. The existing Electoral College, but to make sure that the popular vote winner does win the national election, the winner of the popular vote in this amendment will get basically 12 bonus votes for winning the popular vote. It got nowhere. Every now and then you'll have a constitutional amendment being proposed saying just go to straight popular vote. So on and so forth. But yes, all sorts of amendments proposed on all sorts of things. And yes, sometimes there are amendments that are brought up for vote, and they do pass both houses of Congress. Case in point, the Child Labor Amendment. Child labor was a very serious issue in the late 1800s because you had children working in factories and in mines. As the American workplace, the American economy is changing. Instead of kids just working on the farms, doing chores a minute from long they can walk, you now have kids as employees of corporations working in factories, long hours, 10, 12 hours for only a fraction of the pay their parents would make for doing the same job, working in mines. And yes, children will be maimed and killed on the job working these jobs. Children in the mines, they'd be crushed in cave-ins, died in explosions. Same thing in factories, died in explosions, or a little piece of machinery is jammed, and the boss says, "Hey kid, you're little. Why don't you crawl in there and jiggle that little thing out so this machine will start working again?" And they get crushed by it. And they had all sorts of demonstrations and petitions. It's one labor activist, woman named Mary Mother Jones. She organized a protest in front of the White House so Theodore Roosevelt could see all these kids on crutches, kids who were injured, maimed from accidents in the workplace. The point was, children should not work. Children should be in school. They should not be employed in factories. So Woodrow Wilson becomes president. And he passes two laws. Two laws get passed through Congress. He signs two laws into effect that ban child labor in the United States.
Well, corporations get mad at Wilson for this, and they take these laws to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court twice declares these laws banning child labor unconstitutional. You got companies fighting tooth and nail to make sure a 6-year-old works in a coal mine, or an 8-year-old's working in a boiler room at a steel plant. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, unconstitutional. Keep those kids working in the mines. So, American people and Congress are upset about this. So, in the 1920s, Congress, with a 2/3 majority vote, they passed the Child Labor Amendment, giving Congress the power to ban child labor. A couple of Arkansas guys were really big behind that, and a lot of states are ratifying it. This ended up being the status of it. So these are the states that ratified it here in blue. Pink states rejected it. So most states ended up ratifying it. But a lot of states didn't. And this was the status it was at when it was dropped basically by the by the 1930s. Kind of in a legal limbo. Most states wanting it, but a lot of states say no. So then the Great Depression hits. A lot of men are employed, and Congress passes the Fair Labor Standards Act, which, among other things, banned child labor. And they got that through on the idea that it's the Depression. You got working men with families to feed who are unemployed. These kids, they're taking up those jobs. Send those kids to school where they belong. Put these men back in the factories so they can feed their families. And since then, child labor has been unchallenged. So if you're under 18, some jobs you can't get. Some jobs you can, but you're a limited number of hours you can get. You can't interfere through schooling. Can't be anything deemed as dangerous. But this amendment is still active. It is 10 states from being ratified, if they were actually to bring it up. A few other failed ones here. About the Child Labor Amendment. Rice Amendment, kind of limbo. That Washington, D.C. Voting Rights Amendment, 1978. It would repeal the 23rd Amendment, which gave this Columbia electoral college votes, and said that Washington, D.C. would have the same full representation in Congress as any other state. Basically, a step below statehood. They'd have 2 senators and a congressman. They could vote in the presidential elections, but they still would not be a state. They're their own special little thing. But they had a 7-year time limit on this written into that amendment. And it's unratified when it expired in 1985, so it didn't make it. And because it's written into the amendment, not into the supporting legislation, it can't be brought back. Washington, D.C. says, just make us a state. An interesting one here. Submitted by Congress in 1810. Any citizen accepted title of nobility from a foreign power accepted this without the consent of Congress, any gift from a foreign power, would automatically lose their citizenship. Basically, that's a big deal. They didn't want people taking titles from foreign kings. Remember, a lot of these guys, 1810, they're just coming out of the American Revolution. But I think a couple of states ratified it, and it was dropped in 1812. It has been brought up since. It's just not an issue anymore.
There was also a pro-slavery amendment, 1861, called the Corwin Amendment. Basically said that slavery, where it existed, would not be interfered with. Basically, it would become a state issue, whether an individual state issue, whether or not it would be a slave state or not. That was the last-ditch effort to try to prevent the Civil War, but it wasn't ratified. The northern states just wouldn't go for it. So you get some odd little amendments here and there. So that is the fourth and fifth article of the Constitution. The rest, Article 6, just a few other little things. All debts contracted and engaged entered into before the adoption of this Constitution will be valid, basically saying the United States government saying to its creditors, new Constitution, but we still owe everybody the same money. We're not welching on our debts. Trying to keep the country from going bankrupt. Constitution and all laws of the United States shall be a supreme law of the land. That is national supremacy. Federal government, federal law takes precedence over state and local law. So if there's a contradiction between state and federal law takes precedence. All treaties shall be considered the law of the land because they have been ratified by the Senate. Therefore, that is binding on the United States as a law. So, because the United States is a signatory party to the Geneva Convention, that is the law of the land. Treatment of prisoners of war, that is United States federal law. And one other interesting little thing in here is Article 6 is no religious tests. And what that means is, for any office in the United States, and the Supreme Court's upheld this several times, anything from notary public, city council, on up to the President of the United States, you do not have to say you belong to any religion. That's what a religious test is. Say you belong to any particular religion, or you believe in any particular religious idea. You don't have to do that. The United States federal government is bound on the idea of separation of church and state. The government is to be neutral on that subject. You belong to any religion you want, or not belong to any religion you want. It's your choice. But that is not. But what religion you are, what church you go to, that is not going to have anything to do with your qualifications for that office. No religious test. You don't have to prove anything to anybody with your religion. That's between you and God. Yeah, that's it. First Amendment actually kind of supports that freedom of religion. We'll look into the Bill of Rights later on. Article 7 is ratification. How are you going to put all this together? That says 9 out of 13 states have to approve. This was approved in September 1787, and by June 1788, New Hampshire becomes the 9th state to ratify the Constitution, and it went into effect. That's it. That is your Constitution. Learn it, know it, live it. Questions or comments? Okay, we went way overboard here, but that's it for today.